My name is Pauline Massard. I'm a partner at CIS Visa Partners, and I head at the Brussels office the Cyber and Strategic Intelligence team, where we work mostly on research, foresight, and technology forecasting for EU institutions, national governments, and private sector clients. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this roundtable. We'll focus on the human and the societal challenges that institutions face in building up their cyber capabilities. Now, of course, recruitment issues are very far from a new topic in cyber. Of course, the FIC has long been an exchange platform between recruiters and potential candidates. But I don't quite think we've got a solution yet, and I'll quickly turn to my panel to ask them that question. First, to say that however difficult the recruitment challenge is for private sector organizations, both large and small, I think the issue is really compounded for the public sector, be it national cybersecurity agencies or military cyber commands. First, it's really a numbers issue. I mean, we have a dire lack of technical profiles on the one hand, and a deeply unequal playing field in terms of salaries or other economic incentives on the other. I think it's probably also a question of motivation of young people to work for the government, whether military or civilian. And last but not least, it's an issue of specific needs of military and civilian, national and international cybersecurity actors. So I'm delighted to be joined today by a fantastic panel. I have to my right Mario Beccia, who's Deputy Chief Information Officer at NATO. To my left, I have Colonel Radek Haratek, who is Head of Operations at the Czech Cyber Command. To my very right, Dan Cimpean, who is the Director of Romania's Cybersecurity Agency. And last but not least, to my left, Henri Schrick, who was until recently France's military representative to the EU and NATO. So, Mario, I'm going to turn to you first. So, as I said, you're the Deputy CIO of NATO, which is a still relatively new office, I believe. Could you tell us a little bit about your office's mission, its objectives, and how you are tackling the capability needs to achieve these objectives? Among other things, how are you going about actually manning your office? And perhaps more generally, how's NATO approaching the issue of recruitment of what I would largely call cyber people?
Thank you very much, Pauline, for the question. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Mario Beccia, as Pauline was introducing. And there will be a lot of things to say and explain in answering these questions. So let me start by trying to clarify a few concepts with NATO. At first, when we think about NATO, all of us think about the 31 nations that compose the alliance. NATO is a defense organization that is intended to protect the safety and security of 1 billion people on this planet. This is the common value that the 31 nations share, and the reason why NATO as an organization has been created. And by the way, this week we are celebrating the 74th anniversary of the creation of the organization. Now, when it comes to my role, as Pauline was saying, NATO is also an organization per se. It has a number of systems, a number of priorities. It has a number of objectives set, obviously, by the nations. And this is what we call NATO as an enterprise, NATO as an organization. The enterprise has a number of similarities when it comes to cybersecurity to many organizations, commercial, government, profit and non-profit that you are used to see in the wild. When it comes to cybersecurity, well, in NATO we usually try to split the problem into 3 spheres. The first one is the political sphere. For us, cyber defense and cybersecurity are political issues. There's a huge political significance. I don't have to tell you how important this became with the recent unjustified invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Right? There is a political significance now in anything that gets done in cyberspace, any action and reaction that you observe there. The second sphere for cyber defense and cybersecurity is what we call the military sphere. NATO recognized cyberspace as a military domain of operation in 2016. What this means is that we recognize that cyberspace is a dimension where military objectives can be achieved. And so we need to build up the capabilities, the skills, the knowledge, the processes, the doctrine that is needed to do this. The third element is the technology element. Well, just outside of that door here, we have plenty of stands and plenty of companies that are presenting very interesting technologies and techniques and products. And this is what this part of the organization is really focusing on. What is the technology that we need? What are the processes that we need to run? So if you look at this, my office has been created to provide a strategic direction to this ecosystem. So our role, we are the single point of authority for cybersecurity in the organization. Our role is really to look at how each component in the house is working, what are the processes, what are the objectives, align them with the ambition that comes from the nations, and give strategic direction to the whole family. That is, in 3 words, what our office is supposed to do. Of course, on top of this, we have some more operational functions. We are the top-level incident managers for the organization. Whenever there is a large incident that covers and spans across the boundaries of nations or the small entities inside the organization, this is where my team kicks in and does the coordination and the addressing of that. We also handle and manage the risk of the enterprise ICT systems. So we look at how new threats, new things, new technologies, obsolescence, skill shortage is impacting the organization every day, and we try to determine how to move forward. So this is in a little bit the mission that we have and the way we work. Pauline mentioned the skills shortage. Well, our office was created in 2020, and we were just 3 people at the time. Today we are approximately 40, and we hope to be approximately 100 next year. Now, these numbers may seem insignificant. In NATO words, hiring 30 people in 1 year is a huge achievement. We have long processes. This is one of the issues that I wanted to mention. Government organizations usually have very long and convoluted processes for hiring. In our world, it takes between 18 and 36 months from the moment you have the job description to the moment the new guy sits at his desk for the first time. 18 months to 36. In 36 months, the world has changed 3 times. The world of cybersecurity. Can you imagine that? How complicated this is? The second problem that I will mention is the fact that NATO, just like many of your organizations, we all fish from the same pond of water. We all fish from the same market. The same cybersecurity market is supposed to feed the needs of defense, financial, healthcare, and all the sectors that we know. There is a huge competition. We have people who come, stay on board for a few months, and then get an offer that is double as much than what we can ever offer them. So how do we do this? Well, it all goes back to our mission. Our mission, again, is to ensure safety and security of 1 billion people on the planet. And this is one of the strongest values, one of the biggest missions that these people can get from the market. Usually people come work with us, not because of the money, but because of the peculiarity of the challenge. NATO networks receive the attention of all possible threat actors that you can imagine. All of them are interested in our business. On the other hand, we have a very challenging and very motivating mission. These are the arguments that usually attract people in our environment. Nevertheless, one of the big mind shifts that I wanted to put on the table is we are used to hire people and try to do whatever is possible to keep them in-house. This is the pre-Generation Z mentality. This doesn't work anymore today. So the fact that people come on board, stay with us for a few months, and then leave, must become a fact of life. Must become a managed element. Something that we need to cope with. It's not something that we need to avoid. It's just a fact of life. So we need to get used to it, adapt and adjust our processes and our objectives to this challenge. The last element that I will mention, and I know that Pauline is already asking me to stop. As an Italian, I'm usually talking a lot, so I'm sorry about that. The last element that I will mention is the fact that one of the challenges that we have is also about tooling and technical infrastructure. Most of these people come on board because they want to work with the latest and greatest technologies, the latest and greatest tools, the latest and greatest laptops, and so forward. Well, in many government organizations, we have a huge problem with obsolescence of infrastructure. Our infrastructure has been built 30 years ago, and then it went through layering and layers and layers and layers, adding one on top of the other. Today, we have a big issue with that. And then another aspect of obsolescence. Well, a few weeks ago, my country decided to ban ChatGPT from Italian networks. Up to 5 months ago, probably, well, this is a technical audience, so probably you were aware of that, but most of the world was not even aware of what GPT means or what artificial intelligence means. So it took 6 months from almost complete darkness to coming up to the news and to the relevance of governments and taking decisions, ban, not ban, and etc. 6 months. What can our organizations do in 6 months to adjust to this? Let me tell you this, 0. In 6 months, we can barely take note of what happens. And this is one dimension of obsolescence that we all have to get acquainted with, and we all have to learn to manage. And with this, Pauline, I'll give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario. I was wondering how long it would take to mention ChatGPT, and I think you really broke the record. Thank you. On the competition for talent, I'm well aware of the issue. I have a couple of my senior consultants sitting in the audience, and I've had a number of meetings with institutions that shall remain nameless that tried to poach them in front of me. I'm going to now turn, to Colonel Haratek. Now, you're the head of the operations department of the Czech Cyber Command. I wonder how you are tackling the talent issue, be it the recruitment, but also the training and the retention of staff. I think it was very interesting to hear that we should now just take as a fact of life that people won't stay for very long. Is this something that you're looking at? Do you feel that you are in competition with the private sector? And how do you cooperate with allies on this specific issue? Do you have fora to exchange best practices in terms of recruitment and retention, perhaps within a NATO context or an EU context? And then finally, and I'm sorry, I realize I'm asking a lot of questions in one, but how do you translate your specific military needs into HR policies?
So, good afternoon. Thank you for the questions. I hope I can remember them all. So, basically, we probably deal with the same problems as Mario mentioned, because, again, we are a military organization. And to address actually the HR question or talent management question, we decided basically to get people off the street. My background is in special operations, and we actually adopted similar approach in special operations. We don't need soldiers specialized in cyber. We decided to take young people and bring them in, give them all the necessary education, all courses required, and actually start from scratch. It seems it's much easier actually to address those young people, especially those who haven't decided yet, or they don't have any specialties, they don't have offers from private sector. On the other hand, we understand these people won't stay long. It's exactly young generation, it's not our generation of military personnel that actually came to military estate almost for lifelong. So we give them 3 to 5 years, actually, they can stay and they can decide if they want to leave or they want to become professional soldiers. What we struggle with is actually, as they join military as civilians, they don't have the overview, they don't have the military aspect of cyber operations. And now we face a challenge. Do we start with technical skills? Do we start teaching them actually what they need for their job? Or we give them also the military skills? And we decided actually to postpone that. So we make technician first, And then if they decide to continue in military career, if they stay beyond the 5-year period, we start to actually educate them in military tactics, what it takes to become cyber warrior, because we don't need technicians, we need cyber warriors on the basic level. And we hope actually this approach will pay off in a couple of years when these people get to more senior positions and they start to grow. In relation with actually other actors, if I still have time. Yes, we try to approach, and we are approached on the NATO level by different countries, by actually other partners, and we try to cooperate mainly locally with our civilian agency, the Cyber and Security Agency in Czech Republic. So we share actually the courses, because many of them are not actually very cheap, you know, but they have spare spaces in the courses. So we actually pool the education that comes from NATO as well, sharing and pooling. So we try to manage it this way. I will stop with this, and yeah.
Fantastic. I'll be really interested in if perhaps during the debate afterwards you can give us a sense of what these candidates who are now receiving, who are those young people off the street, I quite like the expression, how they're reacting to having had this training and to their initial time on the job. I think that would be very interesting to hear. I'm going to turn now to Dan Cimpean. You head the National Cybersecurity Directorate of Romania. Now, obviously, you had a civilian rather than a military organization, but I would imagine there are some similarities. I mean, obviously, a fast-growing scope, increasing needs and demand for your services, and at the risk of repeating myself, tough competition on the job market. Does Romania have a specific approach to this? Is there, for instance, a whole-of-government approach? I mean, we heard from Colonel Haratek that he was cooperating with civilian agencies. Is that the case with you too? And are there perhaps any specific initiatives that you'd like to share with us, perhaps that could give an idea to others of what could be done?
Thank you so much. So, because we are talking about competition and the fact that we kind of compete within ourselves, I mean, governmental bodies and the private sector. Let me share with you some real competition in Romania. So about 1 year ago, Romanian government created the Romanian Cyber Directorate, which is a civilian agency. By law, 1,250 staff members. So that's some serious figure. Of course, the first reaction is, oops, where are we going to get this talent? Because we already have problems right now to attract and to retain and to motivate and so on. So conclusion is definitely we need to avoid cannibalization. We need to avoid moving people around, moving experts around. Definitely we need a lot of more talent and resources. So cybersecurity, when it comes to human resources, it's a domain where the numbers, the figures matter. It's not only skills and talent and motivation, it's also volume. So let's not be naive, and let's acknowledge that we need to find ways to get thousands and thousands and thousands of more graduates every year. We need thousands of specialists trained and recycled in order to get the skills we actually need. Honestly, when I was walking around at FIC these days, yesterday and today, I was like, oops, we all want the same. Everyone on the floor, all those companies, all those agencies, we want the best and the brightest. We want experts, we want people that we can activate like that in 1 minute, in 1 hour, in 1 day. People that are highly flexible, highly mobile, not only in the place where they work and where they activate, but also in the domain they cover. So they can change and shift focus and specialties depending on the new technologies. And we saw these days here, my goodness, these organizations, these companies are producing new technologies and new solutions at a speed that is incredible compared with 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So we see a complete new dynamic. So to wrap up on your question, in Romania, we take a kind of all-inclusive approach. We believe it's building the necessary cybersecurity skills at national level and the skills that we have to have available to contribute to the European Union, to NATO, to all our international commitments. This takes intensive effort from all competent governmental authorities, from the industry and from the academic sector. There is no other way to succeed, to build this pool of talent that we all need, except if we closely and strongly cooperate. And one last example, I should not say that because I'm representing a governmental authority, but we should stop being hesitant in discussing very openly about the skills we need. We have discussions with colleagues from one agency or another, civilian or law enforcement or military or intelligence or you name it, or business as well. Everyone is kind of hesitating to speak out and say, hey, in the next 5 years, I need this kind of profiles. I need this kind of skills. Why? Because of strategy, confidentiality. We don't want to really disclose what's going on. My view, my personal view is that, first of all, when it comes to talent, we should not hesitate, speak out and work together to build this pool of talent so we can select the best and brightest. And also, let's not be naive. No one can predict what will happen in 3 years. As you said, in 3 years, the world changes 20 times. So when it comes to the resources, the human resources in particular, this is the most important asset in cybersecurity, in cyber defense. And honestly, we should have probably 10 times more available than whatever we plan and what we think today, if we want to be successful.
Thank you very much, Dan. I think I'll want to come back at some point to your various organizations' cooperation with the education ecosystem, universities, but of course, probably school. But before that, I'm going to turn now to Henri Schrick, who was until recently France's military representative to the EU and NATO. So, Henri, you have a unique perspective because, of course, you've seen it all from the inside, at national level in France, but also in EU circles and within the NATO framework. So my question to you is really, who's really leading the game in terms of the talent race today, but also who should be leading it? And perhaps if you can give us a sense of what are the key challenges or obstacles that you've observed in your various roles.
Merci, Pauline.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in French.
Suffisamment lentement pour que l'interprétariat se fasse.
I'm going to help the interpreters. Thank you very much. Yes, Mario just scared us a little bit. Yes, but he talked about really the very critical matter, the capability of adaptation of our organizations. These organizations are responsible towards the citizens about the collective capability of responding in the cyber field. I think this is somehow new in this field. Another element also, which is very specific in the cyber field, up till now, if there were technological progress, of course, we would talk about the hardware, the material. In the defense sector, we were worried, or it was a concern. What about human resources that should be available? But at the end of the day, we would work in silos. And we said, okay, we need these or that experts with a specific material, but we did not think that the evolution would be so rapid. In the space field, in the nuclear field also, yes, of course, there was this competition sometimes about the salaries between the private sector and the public sector, salary-wise, but the volume of the resources would exist. as a whole.
Et les problèmes, finalement,
The problem was not really known by everybody. It was somehow a confidential issue. But now, today, the whole of society is invested in this matter. The human topic, the capability to respond, means that we have to have a very different approach. We cannot find all the solutions today. Pauline, I'm sorry you're disappointed, but a very different approach, a very ambitious approach. We talk about, it's not all of government approach, it should be all society approach. And this is the title of our discussion. When we talk about societal challenge, I would like to invite people who could not do so to listen to the Minister of Defense, the Belgian Minister of Defense yesterday, who talks about all the possibilities of a government in order to be able to get along. And in the French case, this was written in a magazine in 2022, lots of efforts should be done for defense and resilience, with a strategic objective number 4 about cyber resilience of the French government. So I read this strategic objective again, and it's really fascinating that we talk only about material capability, but they do not talk enough about human resources, actually. So the speeding up, yes, up till now, yes, this is the case. It's an actual question of governance, and we don't have any model to follow. So let us accept that today there is no governance which would show, which would ensure us that we can be successful in this field. European Union, NATO, each of the governments is looking today for a recipe, for a solution. Yes, cyber defense belongs mainly to the private sector. So, Mario, yes, you're right. We talk a lot about human resources, about material competition between public sector and private sector. But at the end of the day, in order to have all these equipments work and function, we forgot one topic, the importance of cross-fertilization, because in our field, because we live in democracy, it's the issue of regulation. All these exchanges are indispensable. We need regulations which are helpful, which are a strong point, and not something which is going to block us. Thank you very much. I'm going to finish.
I'm going to switch back to English. Before I head to the floor, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. So really, at least Colonel Haratek and Mario, you've been really advocating a brand new paradigm of just accepting that, oh God, I'm going to sound old now, that today's young people will not stay with an organization for very long. I mean, clearly the model of entering a company and staying there your whole life has changed. The same is now true for both the military and other government organizations. But I wonder what impact that new model will have on operations, on continuity, and as a result on resilience, number one. Number two, does this mean that as a result we need an army of recruiters? I mean, it's going to become more than a full-time job to keep replacing these people. And then my second question that I'm really going to put to you all is, how far are your different organizations working with the educational system? I mean, obviously universities are one thing, but are we not too late if we come to universities? Is it not time? I mean, I always take this example. I find it so shocking. I have children who are 9 and 10 years old. They don't know what cybersecurity is. They don't have coding classes in school. There is nothing. Is that not a very serious issue? And what can we do about it? Where can your organizations come in terms of building awareness and thus ensuring your own pipeline further down the line? Dan, I'm perhaps going to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Definitely, we need to build a pipeline of experts for the next 5, 10, 20 years looking at what we know today and the situation of today. And I truly believe we need to definitely completely think out of the box and try to address this challenge that is exceptional in magnitude, in complexity, with truly exceptional and out-of-the-box solutions. To give a very simple example, very tiny one, what we are ready to do in Romania, we really want to reach out, of course, to universities, to education system, and push cyber basic skills and knowledge to ages as young as possible. But we want also to solve a bit, or to try to address the problem of fast rotation of experts. We want to really work together with the industry. So we are ready, for example, to give contracts to high potential, talented young people in partnership with the industry, to have young, talented, exceptionally people, cyber professionals that work part-time for the government, part-time for the industry. And this way, from the very beginning of their career, they start understanding both worlds, and sooner or later in their career, they can make this shift back and forth much easier. Because that's the type of culture of working, and not only skills and motivation and hours spent during the day, is the type of mindset that we need in cybersecurity. People that can shift easily between public sector, private sector, academia, and so on. And we have to use all the ways, all the crazy idea we can imagine in order to make this happen. And we need to do it, to start somewhere, and then expand, and have these in thousands at the level of each country, ideally, in order to be able to address properly the challenge in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Otherwise, the young generation of today will look at us and say, hey, you haven't done your job, you failed it in 2023 or 2024. So honestly, I'm worried about this, and I really want to really put in place any crazy idea we can just to try to address the issue. We don't know whether we'll fix it or not, but I honestly believe we should try everything that we can.
Thanks so much. Any crazy ideas from the Czech Republic?
So far, I don't have any crazy ideas, but I wanted to address actually one part of your question, and that's what happens to the people that actually rotate in and out. And we are quite happy to release them to the industry, to the private sector, because it's the resilience that we are building. And Henri, you mentioned it, it's a whole of society approach. So if the military loses those people, actually, they don't disappear. They still remain in cybersecurity business. They still remain working for private industry. They build the critical infrastructure, and that's part of our societal resilience. And we don't have any problem with this. On the other hand, part of those people actually remain in our reserves. So they participate in military as a reserve. There is a small challenge to it, and that's time of war. So we don't expect war in short time in Europe, hopefully. But if the wartime comes, actually, they have to decide where they work. Do they work in critical infrastructure, or they come to military? So we try to avoid those people who actually go and work with nuclear power plants, to take them into reserves, because we know in time of crisis they wouldn't come and actually help the military. But that's one of the points. In terms of education, we try to build our own programs. So our National Defense University, they have cybersecurity program. They don't produce too many graduates because, again, it's a military program. If you join military, you usually join military for other and more interesting stuff, right? You want the adventure. But yeah, we still get for our needs about 11, 12 graduates per year. The problem with those programs is they're quite rigid. And you said, you know, the time and the world changes every 3 years. So we need to really look at changes to the program. The program needs to change periodically, constantly, actually, and adjust to the new challenges that are coming.
I see. Martin, I'm going to let you pick up on perhaps some of their points in addition to my questions.
Sure, thank you. Let me try to offer three different thoughts at three different levels on this problem. At first, as Henri was saying, I mean, this clearly is a whole of society approach. Is something that needs a whole of society approach. Let me give you an example of the entity and the scope that this change should cover. As you probably understand, I'm not exactly from Generation Z. I'm slightly older than that. In my generation, the education that I received was really oriented towards a certain professionality. When I picked my university, there was no job description, if you want, but it was clearly oriented to a certain profession. So my generation was studying to become a physician, a doctor, an expert of physics, a journalist, a lawyer, or whatever. In today's world, we cannot afford to do that, simply because if you start entering today the education system, and so you are looking at spending between 5 and 15 years, depending on the type of education you take, we simply don't know what are going to be the jobs in 5 to 10 years from now. We don't know what professionalities are going to be sought after. We don't know exactly the difference that we're going to have between a lawyer, a journalist, a physician, or whatever. So the type of education that we need to start working on really has to focus on another approach. The approach has to focus on how do I manage information? How do I look, seek, understand, and what is the tools and the mindset that I need to use to have a critical approach to this information. Another big area is, in my generation, one of the big values was I start my profession in a certain job and I need to keep my job for as long as possible. Today, job flexibility has to be embedded in education. Our kids need to know and need to understand how to work in an environment where they change their jobs every 3 years or every 2 years. That is the kind of perspective that they have today. So we cannot feed them with an education system that is still built for 15, 20, 30 years careers in the same place. It just doesn't, the world is different today. So this is one element that probably from a society perspective, we all have to work on, we as government leaders, I mean. Another big element that I think is very important is when it comes to education that is needed specifically for an organization, well, there are some areas, and cybersecurity is definitely one of those, that have to be transversal to any position, to any job function that you have. NATO cannot afford anymore to have people who are in a certain function and have no clue about the main and the basic essential cybersecurity awareness elements. So this is one of the reasons, for instance, that one of the programs that we are following is how do we inject cybersecurity in all possible training programs we have. It doesn't matter if you're following a course for a petty officer, for a military analyst, or you're following a course for, I don't know, for a command and control system. It doesn't matter. You need to have a baseline of knowledge that is necessary to be a good citizen of the organization. The third element that I will offer on this is mostly in the individual sphere. All of us, we all have ambitions, we all have needs, we all have objectives. One of the things that we need to consider is that these objectives should take into account that the world is changing every year or every 2 years. We cannot pretend anymore as individuals that we need to have that type of contract, that type of security, that type of geographical location. All of these things are becoming, I don't want to say irrelevant, but much less relevant. From an individual perspective, what matters is the values of the organization that you are joining. So what kind of values do you want to see reflected in the ecosystem of the organization that you work in? This is what really matters for each individual that is looking for a job today. Pauline.
Thanks very much. I'd go further than what you said earlier, which is that actually all good citizens should be able to have that minimum cybersecurity awareness. And I think that the sector as a whole still suffers from a very bad image. People are still afraid of technology. They consider it not their remit, not their problem, not their issue. It's a bit like just turning on the tap and wanting hot water, but not wanting to know where the hot water comes from. The problem is these days our lives are increasingly digital, and if we are to increase our resilience, we need that awareness. Henri, I know that you're very involved in education. What are your views on that particular area? Where can we increase the bridges really with that ecosystem?
Oui, en fait, moi je retiens que nous sommes donc tous acteurs.
So I would say that we are all stakeholders in this topic. Of course, this seems pretty obvious, but there are two kinds of stakeholders. You have, on the one hand, the experts, the one that are in charge, and on the other hand, the one you have to educate, you have to train. And I'm quite optimistic. Why? First, because we need to be optimistic, but also because if you look closely, there are many things happening right now. First of all, we see a certain number of European experts coming back from the GAFAs, from the Big Five, to Europe. Why? Because they want to defend democracy. It might seem a bit pedantic to say so, but I've met these people, and that's why they say they want to defend democracy. So they come back to the private sector, I have to admit it, but to the private sector in Europe. So what I like from that is that these people are maybe less attracted to the Silicon Valley right now, and they think it's interesting also to work in Europe. And so I think it's a major change. It's very important. So we see experts coming back, leading figures coming back. And this can also raise interest for all the governments, international organizations, NGOs. They can work for all of these organizations because it's not only about the hardware. We need the minds. We need the curiosity of all these experts and the people in general. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention that was quite positive. Secondly, I see a lot of efforts being done in education. It's a bit late, but it's done. Lancy talked this morning, and I see that there's a lot of information available online. So yes, we have to do the effort to go there, to go online and look for the information. So yes, it's still a work to be done, but there is something available now. So it's positive too. And finally, I like to take the example of Ukraine. Why? Okay, Ukraine is living in a dramatic situation, but let's come back to the digital transformation in Ukraine. It started in 2016. This allowed the people there and the state to be very resilient. They were underestimated, and they had really this will, the government and the will, to educate the entire society, the entire people to cybersecurity, and now they are very resilient. So let's learn the lessons from that, and maybe we should impose education on this topic. Yes, maybe ideally, when we will be, instead of saying when we will be thinking about education, we should say we should think right now about education.
Can I get a quick heads up of how many questions there are? If you can raise your hands. I have one here. One in the middle, and merci. So 1, 2. If we can get microphones, we're going to start with the gentleman in the front, please. Thank you. Anglais ou français pour les questions, tout va bien. Right there in the front, thank you. Italian less.
in English. Well, thanks a lot. My question pertains to, well...
Sorry, if you can just introduce yourself.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Eugene Kim. I'm investment banker, but I'm a reservist for the French police for cyber. Okay. So my question relates to attracting, but also keeping the young people that you would, that would join you, because as you said, innovation in the private sector and the matter of cyber is evolving every week. So for these persons to keep being effective, efficient, if they join quite a rigid organization, staying 1-2 years, if they don't have the same ecosystem that help them keep efficient, and with exchanges with peers, research, what financial means, they may say, well, I joined the army because I want to defend my country, but I'm losing my value. I don't have any training. I cannot keep up with my peers. And second, if you keep these guys without providing them the right ecosystem, I'm not talking about general knowledge of cyber. You will keep the bad guys because they won't be effective. No, I'm provocative. Huh? So this is a matter of ecosystem, because if in front of you you have Russians, Ukrainians, well, that's quite a hybrid. It's very flexible. Young guys coming not from the army. So do you see my point? I think that's one of the key issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take the second question right away, just for time purposes. So here are 2 questions already, and how do you ensure that young recruits are kept up to date with evolutions in the ecosystem? And then I suppose the second question was really, how do you sort the wheat from the chaff? Yep.
Bonjour à tous. I'm George Bathurst. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I advise the UK government and also volunteer for the police doing cybercrime investigations. One of the things the UK is doing is something called Secure by Design, where we're redefining cybersecurity and saying, actually, we have too many cybersecurity consultants, not too few, because if you reframe it as saying, actually, everybody is a cybersecurity person. So we're training up project managers to actually do cybersecurity at the beginning of their projects and understand it's their problem, not somebody's problem they hire. And so my question is, what do you think the chances are of this being adopted as a NATO-wide initiative so that we all agree actually on a better way of doing projects across Europe?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. I'm going to change around the order. Henri, shall we start with you?
I will answer to the first question mainly. I think that indeed governments do realize that there's a limit to the way they do things and that there's a real challenge to keep their talents in cyber security. That's why in France we work on the reserve. We want more and more people to be part of the reserve for the military. That's why we have these agreements with the private sectors, with the education world, the academic world, and this is in link with what I said earlier. We really want to raise the citizenship awareness on the need to defend your democracy. It might seem a bit pedantic, but I really think we are observing a change in the mindsets in Europe. But in cybersecurity, there's a question that is being raised. We have to find a balance between the state, the military or the state bodies, and the private sector. Up until today, the military was the one leading the process, that was the one really pushing forward development and technological development, and the private sector would then benefit from it. And now we see that things have changed. It's now the private sector that is leading the way. So what do we expect from the state now? Maybe we don't want the state to just keep the bad ones, the bad seeds. No, we want the state maybe to train the people to be able to use the known weapons, technological weapons, but also have a monitoring of what is appearing in this ecosystem. But now there's really a new balance between the state and the private sector.
Colonel, would you like to perhaps answer those questions and perhaps the British question about this secure by design approach?
Right, so I address the first question. You're talking from my heart, basically, because one thing is to take young people off the street and train them, but many of those who join, actually, they want to stay career technicians. And military is hierarchical organization. You have to go up the ladder or out, basically. So it is really hard to maintain people in one job for even those 5 years, because there is a push, there is a need for promotion. If you step up the ladder, you actually lose your technical skills. You have to move to management position, and people don't like it. So we try to provide actually courses, education, even at home or abroad. So we send them, so there are different motivations to keep them. It's more building the network actually to meet people from other nations, other organizations, and they see the problem is everywhere. It is not just in their organization. Of course, private sector moves much faster. They invest more money, but usually those who stay in the military, they're not doing it for money. And I think that was mentioned here several times. And sir, I really like your approach because, yeah, believe it or not, there are still people who start a project, and once the project is designed, they say, okay, now put cybersecurity on it. And we say, okay, so let's start over, right? We start the project from scratch, and basically we have to redesign it all to make it cyber secure. So the idea is really good. I think the managers need to understand it. Everyone needs to understand that whatever they start, whatever new project, if it is IT or new weapon these days, because it can be the military, Internet of Things, actually all weapons connected, sensors connected, there needs to be cyber security from the first point you actually start working on the project. And education for the leaders, actually for the managers in the military, for the generals, is one of the key aspects we need to address. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Dan, please.
Let me chip in and bring my 5 cents of contribution. First, on the security by design. I think here we all have a challenge. It's the traditional challenge of shifting from reactive mode to proactive when it comes to cybersecurity. Let's stop thinking that we need to patch and we need to respond to incidents, and we have to shift slowly in the mindset that we have to do the things right from the very beginning. We have to be proactive, and so on and so on. And up to that moment, we'll still be in the same old paradigm. I mean, we'll have the same problems, and we'll not learn enough from them. Then I wanted to share with all of you something that happened to me this morning. This morning I got approached by one very young person, one very young gentleman that saw I have a green badge, so he thought I'm speaker, so I know everything. And he asked me whether I know any of the companies that can talk to him about a career called prompt engineer. I don't know if you are aware. He explained me immediately in 2 minutes what a prompt engineer is. Apparently, it's one person that knows how to discuss with ChatGPT and ask the right questions. So I told him, yeah, but do you realize this is a cybersecurity forum? Yeah, but this is what I'm interested, because you guys, you must have this somewhere. Of course, I was not able to tell him go there or there and talk to some guys, but made me thinking that we are really really completely naive and not yet prepared for what's going on. I mean, right now, right here. Things are moving on and we are still thinking how to address this and how to address that, while the young generation that go exactly and very precisely where they want to get. And I'm afraid very much we as organizations, as ecosystems, we are not sexy enough and cool enough for them. And to wrap up on this point, we have to shift also from competing between organizations, so my organization with your organization, and thinking a bit how to make the entire ecosystem being better together and keep them in the Czech ecosystem or the French ecosystem or the EU or the NATO ecosystem and make the entire ecosystem being cool and sexy. But we have to break a bit silos for this, to stop competing between us and work together on fixing the challenge. Because today, honestly, I want to be very honest with you, we are still working in silos. I want the best for my organization, for me. I don't think about you. As long as we still take decisions like this and things like that, we are going to have a challenge that will not fix that easy. And those guys will walk around asking for prompt engineer jobs. And I'm pretty sure no one, or at least no government, offered yet him a job on that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ask my colleagues to prepare a prompt engineer forum for next year. But to go back to your earlier point, though, about cooperating better, I wonder if that's, and working in silos and thinking I want the best and the brightest for my organization, is it because the penny still hasn't completely dropped that I'm only as strong as the lowest common denominator in the gang, and since the gang is now global, no, but truly, I wonder if it's very difficult to have that mind shift. On that note, sorry, Mario, over to you to answer those questions.
Well, I think in brief, the answer to the last question is yes. It hasn't dropped yet. And I think that this is one of the biggest issues that we have, again, as defense and government leaders today. How do we enhance cooperation in all possible dimensions? It's cooperation between civil and military. This is a big topic that we are trying to work on and to change dramatically in the next years. It is cooperation between industry and government entities. This is a fundamental factor. Let's look at the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine, right? I mean, basically, most of the success of Ukraine as a country, I shouldn't say success, but most of the results that they were able to achieve, they were supported by industry partners. They were supported by preparation that happened in the previous years with industry partners. And then there is the third dimension, which is the one you were referring to, cooperation intergovernmental organizations. This is another fundamental problem that we need to solve. In many organizations, mine first, but then there are in any nation this is happening. There are several agencies, several small offices hiding somewhere on the territory that have a crucial role in protecting the critical infrastructure of the country, or in responding to an incident, or in understanding how a certain piece of malware was created. But we simply don't know about it, and we simply don't know how to reach this talent that is already present somewhere in the periphery of the organization. Another thing that I wanted to go back to was the question from the gentleman there in the audience on security by design. One of the things that is very near and dear to my heart is security by design is a fundamental principle, but then it has to be split into components. I mean, whenever you run a project, you need several areas in which security, cybersecurity and security has to be embedded. One area, for instance, is the architecture. We cannot change the architecture of a system in an advanced stage, and yet today we keep designing systems without considering cybersecurity requirements. Today, we don't have yet a culture of baselining cybersecurity requirements, of saying, this is the baseline. And it doesn't matter if it's a command and control system, or if it is the one that you use to display the daily menu in your kitchenette. You need to have a set of baseline requirements. And by the way, the menu you see displayed for a kitchenette is a real example. It was a real incident that came to the news a while ago. So it's in open sources. So this is one dimension. Another dimension is the fact that any system before before entering into production has to be accredited. It has to be reviewed, and its compliance has to be certified. This is how it works in any government organization, not only in defense. And this has to be considered from the beginning. You cannot arrive 5 years later after the fact and then say, okay, now we need to accredit it. It doesn't work like that. The third element is any system that embeds security, it also needs to have training for its operators. You cannot afford to design a system, implement it, acquire it, put it into production, and then your people don't know how to use it and don't know how to operate it securely. So what I'm trying to say is that security by design is a very complex business, unfortunately, and there's a number of focus areas that have to be considered. Now, there are several initiatives. We heard yesterday Commissioner Thierry Breton talking about the network of cybersecurity competency centers. This is a very important project in the EU environment. Another important initiative is the certification schemes that the EU is coming up with in order to put a sort of cybersecurity stamp on any product that is sold on the European market. All of these initiatives are supposed to ease somehow the problem of security by design, but they are not the solution. Each of every organization has to understand how to run projects where cybersecurity is considered from the beginning, not only for architectures, not only for training, not only for accreditation, but for all the dimensions that we need to ensure an adequate level of cybersecurity. And I'll close responding to the gentleman here. I think what you described is exactly the concept of organizational culture that I was referring to. What matters to take from people from the market, and especially to retain them as much as possible, is really the culture of the organization. And the culture is composed of several things. It's the tools, it's the laptop you have on your desk, it's also your colleague that is sitting aside of you, it's your boss, it's also the people of your team. These are all components of your culture. If we keep having processes, operational and recruitment, that were built 30 years ago with the people of today, probably we're not going to go very far.
Thank you so much. I think we have just about enough time for another round of questions. Are there any questions in the room? Yes, here in the front and all the way at the back. I think the mic is closer to the back, so I will come to you. We're going to start with just up there. Thank you. I can barely see. And if you could just introduce yourself for your question and keep it short because we really are running out of time. Thank you.
Hello, Stéphane Javonet. I'm from Bouygues Telecom. I'm working on governance and risk management. I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay. You said that there is no governance in Europe, and we might not expect one. How do we prepare for an event of an attack on Europe? Do we have cyber exercises between countries cooperating for defense or offense if necessary?
Thank you very much. And then we have in the front, please. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Federica Marino. Sorry, I work as a political advisor at NATO. And so you all come from national and international organization, and you have all agreed that nowadays talent, you just cannot expect a person to be in the same career. Considering all your nation are strongly linked to multilateral organizations, in this case EU and NATO. Do you think it's feasible to have a more streamlined process to facilitate the rotation of talents among nations and multilateral organizations? Or do you have any idea on how to facilitate this process? For example, NATO, we have the national contribution, national voluntary contribution, but this is just temporary personnel that is kind of landed from the nation to the organization. I'm wondering if there's like any other possibility for that, if you have any new idea. Could that be that? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Federica. I'm going to add one of my questions very, very quickly. I also happen to, besides my day job, I'm also part of an organization called WISE, Women in International Security. I can't help but see that I'm one of not many women on the panel, and I am glad to see a few of you in the room, but there really aren't many. And I think if you walk on the shop floor, if I might call it that, there aren't many either. It seems to me that we're cutting ourselves off from half of the talent, number one. But diversity is about more than just gender diversity. It also seems oh so white in this exhibition. How do we reach out to make sure that our defense and security institutions represent the citizens that they serve? But we'll start with the other questions, of course. Henri, I think the first question was actually directed to you with the governance.
Merci.
Thank you. I believe that we have not said that there was no governance. We rather talked about the questions and the challenges. But there are challenges of governance to be met, and there are things which are being established. The question you raised is the issue of resilience, broadly speaking, and the issue of the very definition of accountability among states or between states and organizations. I even go further. To what extent the collective organizations should prescribe or should give incentives for resilience? To what extent are we ready to authorize the intrusion of NATO, the European Union, or any other organization into our own way of working? This is really an open question and extremely difficult to answer. Personally speaking, I'm against too much intrusion, too much prescription from these organizations, but the organizations should be capable of identifying very early the weak points of their own organizations, where we are talking about resilience and cyber dimension. We might ask the same question when we talk about capability development in the organizations. Should we give prescription or should we give incentives? About the talents, I don't know everything, but I really believe in cross-pollination between organizations. So it's a mindset about the management of human resources. And each state has their own culture. And the evolution is very, very slow in this field.
Would you like to come in?
Yes, I would actually like to address the questions about exercise and governance. NATO in particular is developing really strong capabilities. They exercise regularly. I think the biggest yearly exercise is called Cyber Coalition. It's usually before Christmas, sometime late November, beginning of December. And I think NATO exercises its capabilities. I know NATO is not just Europe, it's outside Europe as well. And the European Union military capabilities are, I would say, unfortunately, a bit behind NATO's capabilities. But yes, we do exercise our defense regularly. And it's not the only exercise. I think in the civilian area is lock shields, where the civilian companies, civilian institutions participate. In talent, it's really difficult for women, especially in cybersecurity. I mean, on technical level. I know on and I've seen the cybersecurity competition here on the other floor. We have our final round in Czech Republic end of April. There are a few ladies on the teams, I know they are, but I think we need to start in families. Myself, I have 2 daughters. None of them is technically keen. They don't work on computers too much. They mathematically oriented, but not computer oriented. And I think you have to encourage it in the family. High school or actually university is too late for me, for ladies actually to start. So you really have to start early. And that's what, for us, we have, in our headquarters, we have about 40% actually women. But if I take the technical staff, it's much less. It's about 10%. We have established one of the ladies, our rapid reaction team commander recently. So they come to leadership positions as well. But yeah, it's much fewer women in the technical sphere.
I mean, the good news is that most of the women I see around here are quite young, so maybe it's also a generational thing. Mario, over to you.
Well, a lot has been said already, so let me try to insist on a few points. As Radek said just now, NATO is really a lot into exercising. You would say that in the last 40 years of operation, most of the time spent by NATO people is really organizing, executing, and learning from exercises. When it comes to cyber, the colonel mentioned already 2 of the largest cybersecurity exercises that we do, cyber coalition and lock shields. One of the things that we have been doing since the last 3 years, I would say, is to inject cyber elements in every single exercise we do. This goes from large exercises for people familiar with NATO language, the Steadfast series. These are exercises where real troops are moving, real planes are flying, and real ships are sailing, and etc. In all of those, now, as of 3 years ago, we have a strong cyber component. Then we have some exercise types, some exercise families, if I may, that are more focusing on the command chain. So how you control and govern and command an operation, for instance. These are more directed geared towards the leadership, the management of the organization. These exercises now are also extremely focused on cyber. There was one of these exercises executed just a few weeks ago, and during the NAC is the highest governance body in the organization, North Atlantic Council. That's where each of the prime ministers or the defense ministers sit from all the various nations. The exercise there was based on a cyber scenario, just to give you the importance of how we feel this inside the organization. So this is extremely strong. Now, is this enough? Probably not, in the sense that there are still many areas of cyber where probably we should exercise more and we should understand more. And I was mentioning some of the topics in my previous answer. So when it comes to cooperating with industry and with civilian entities, this is a fundamental area for exercises, for cyber exercises. Lock Shields is very strong on this. Cyber Coalition is very strong on this. We need to do more in that. There's an element of understanding, as Pauline was reminding us, the inclusion and the gender dimension. In exercises, this is also a recurring topic now. How this affects decision processes, how this affects execution of operations. So just to tell you that these are all dimensions that are being injected in our daily work. And I wanted to go back to the gentleman up there who was asking about governance and incidents. Well, I had the, I don't know if I have to call it the luck or unluck, to follow some large incidents in the last 10 years that happened across Europe. When we had the first real cyber incidents in Georgia and in Estonia in 2006, 2008. Well, at that time, the organization was mostly unprepared. Unprepared means that we had knowledge in the organization, we were working on information assurance, traditional security processes, but surely cyber, as we conceive it today, was very different and very far away. Another example that I can take is over the summer of 2016 and 17, there has been 2 waves of very large malware campaigns spanning across Europe. You will remember Petya, not Petya, WannaCry. These are all names that you have seen in the news. Well, at that time, our preparedness was a bit better than 2006 and 2008. It was still not perfect, and there has been a lot of improvement since then. Yesterday, we heard, again, Commissioner Breton mentioning a number of new cybersecurity acts that the EU is introducing, is going to introduce. Some of them, one of them is called the Cyber Resilience Act, that is going to improve the way that we do this all together in the European context. So this to say that a lot has been done in government circles to increase our level of preparedness. Is this enough? Absolutely not. And the reason why we are all here talking about this is exactly that. We definitely need to do more.
We're really running out of time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to give the floor to Dan, if that's okay. I'm so sorry. We're very, very close to out of time.
Thank you so much. I will
yes,
be
please.
very brief, and I wanted to pick up on the question that you asked on ideas and what we are doing. I think just some thoughts I want to share with you. Cybersecurity, many organizations, they see it as a cost at this moment, honestly. But the most successful ones, and many of them are here at FIC, they don't see it as a cost, they see it as an investment and as a great opportunity. So as long as we will continue to see cyber, and in particular the human aspects, elements of cybersecurity as a cost, purely as a cost, we are not going to be successful. The moment when we remember the concept return on investment starts with the investment, and then we have the return, and investing in people, investing in talent when it comes to cybersecurity probably will be one of the domains that will bring the biggest benefits for society, for governments, for business, for all of us as citizens, as leaders, as decision makers, doesn't matter. The moment we realize this and we systematically work with this mindset, because it's a mindset, and we cooperate and we move in that direction, then we will really do something. So remember, it's not a cost, it's an investment.
Thank you so much. I know we're out of time, but I would like each of our speakers to give me a 30-second answer to this question. If there were no financial, administrative, or political considerations or limitations, what is the one idea that you would start implementing tomorrow? Dan, you have 30 seconds.
Honestly, everything we discussed, brains. I want brains. I will get as many as possible around.
Thank you. Mario?
I would change the way recruitment is done, and the way that talent and training and education is done, in the organization, and make it, as you said, not cost-based, but profit-based.
Thank you so much. Colonel Haradek.
So basically, money is not the issue, I think, in cybersecurity. It's people, it's brains, and it's talent. And you can't buy it. You can't basically produce it by money. So it's mostly for governments, it's the administrative and legislative issues, actually, and we need to take care of this. And exactly, our recruitment process, it takes too long comparing to civilian companies. So we have several recruits, but before we can get them in, someone else steals them. So that's a problem.
I can understand the frustration. Henri, le mot de la fin.
Comme je n'ai pas de badge vert, je ne sais pas tout.
I don't have a green badge, so I don't know everything. We are aware that there are very many approaches. Up till now, there is a bottom-up approach, and the technology comes from very many different entities. What I wish is a more obvious involvement of governments and organizations to support the exercise in all the fields, recruitment, technology development, and this is what I can remember from what the officials have said, to reconcile button up, upper,
I'd like to
and the
thank
other
all
side.
my panelists today for your contributions. Thank you to the audience for your wonderful questions. A big thank you, of course, to the team organizing the FIC, who've been at hard work for months and months. Merci beaucoup à la traduction. And it remains for me to tell you have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the forum. Thanks.